Hey, sixth period. Um, Today I am going to have Mrs. Barton play this little video for you so that I can introduce you to these three sheets of paper that you picked up yesterday. The first is this hero's journey. The second is the steps of the ordinary world. And then the third is the hero's journey outline. I wish I could have gone over them with you yesterday, but the nice thing is since we're going over them today, this is what you're going to need to be able to watch the movie that we're going to watch. Okay, so most of you remember from freshman year or even from last year, and from what we actually talked about yesterday, that the hero's journey has certain steps. And as several of you mentioned, it has steps such as a call to action, something that interferes with the call, the hero gets assistance, something additionally traumatic happens within the journey, there's a final hour at the bottom of the cycle, the hero faces what he or she is trying to overcome, and then there's a return home. Okay, so that's what this is. I'm not sure which version that you got, but they're all pretty much the same. You're going to be quizzed on these tests eventually at the end, so I just want you to remember and write up here the name Joseph Campbell. He's the one who came up with this hero's journey idea, and he wrote a book called The Hero with 1,000 Faces. Please write this. You'll need to know the title of his book. When we write, we always underline the titles of our works. Right now is when I would ask you to just turn and talk and chat with your neighbor about what it means for a single hero to have 1,000 faces. But as you can probably guess, this is when Joseph Campbell looked at all of the stories, all of the great stories in literature and great movies and plot lines. He found what he called a monomyth. Mono means single, so just one single myth or story. A single story that takes all different kinds of shapes. And it gives us an opportunity to watch movies and read literature and discover how the writer has changed the story so that things might be a little bit different, the hero might look a little bit different, but the path of the journey is often the same. Even when we have a hero that experiences a tragedy at the end, like possibly even death, the hero can still return to the community and still have come back with something greater than what he had when he started his adventure. Okay, so in a broad general sense, I like this diagram. There's the call to adventure. Then there's crossing over the threshold, the challenges and temptations, the abyss, how he transforms. There's an atonement, and then there's a return. Okay, now the next piece of paper I want you to have in front of you is this. So each one of these explains sections of the hero's journey. We start out in what's called the ordinary world. So everything that I write, I'd like you to write. Okay, so let's write this, and also Mrs. Barton, or whoever is subbing, I believe it's going to be Mrs. Barton, she can pause the video if you need time. So this is called the ordinary world. Now, here, the ordinary world, if you could do this also at the same time, the hero is either uneasy or uncomfortable or too comfortable. That's another thing. The hero could be too comfortable, like the Hobbit. What's his name? Bilbo Baggins? Or unaware, and he's introduced sympathetically so the audience can identify with the situation or the dilemma. And there's an environment, there's some personal history, and there's some kind of polarity in the hero's life. This is a great word. When we talk about polar, we mean polar opposites, like the North Pole and the South Pole. And something's pulling the hero in different directions and causing stress. So that's the ordinary world up here. There's a call to adventure, which we have here. That's step 2. Then there's a refusal of the call. Will you write that in here? Refusal of the call. That's step 3. Now, there are actually 17 steps, but I'm going to only limit it to 12 for you guys. The call to adventure is here. Something shakes up the situation, and something rises from deep within. The refusal of the call is where the hero feels the fear, please underline this, of the unknown, and tries to turn away. Another character may express the uncertainty and danger ahead. So there's the refusal of the call. Number 4 is the meeting with the mentor, and there might be a seasoned traveler or someone wise. So let's put this here, the mentor. That doesn't always have to happen, but sometimes it does. And finally, the hero crosses the threshold. So here's the ordinary world, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the crossing of the threshold. Okay? Now, the challenges and temptations, we call this number 6. And these are also called tests, allies, and enemies. Oops. And enemies. All right, so do you see that? Here we go. Here's tests, allies, and enemies. Oops, have you been able to see that? Tests, allies, and enemies. The hero is tested and sorts out allegiances in the special world. Now, all kinds of things can happen here. The hero can find a mentor. The hero can find a helper. The hero can face temporary enemies, find allies, people who are going to help the hero. And then in number 7, we have the approach. The hero and the newfound allies prepare for the major challenge. All right, this is where the approach is probably right here. Let's put this here. 7 is the approach, so go ahead and please write this down. By the way, just letting you know that when I come back, I want to make sure that all this is filled out. That's going to give you a nice formative, mastery formative. And if you've got this annotated, that'll give you a nice mastery formative as well. Okay, so there's the approach. And then here's what this calls the ordeal, but also called the abyss, or where there's a death, or where there's some kind of revelation. This is often the climax. The approach is often the climax before the hero gets to the ordeal, or the climax could also be here. This is where the big moment of the hero comes face to face, oftentimes with his or her own greatest fears. Mrs. Barton might need to stop this while you're writing that. All right, so there's 8 is the revelation, or the abyss, or the ordeal. Then the transformation, Joseph Campbell calls that the reward, but there's also a transformation that comes with that. So let's do that. In 9, the transformation, there's a reward. It could be an elixir. It could be a philosopher's stone, like in Harry Potter. It could be knowledge. It could be a sword, like for King Arthur, the sword and the stone, a special weapon, or special powers. So the transformation often comes with some kind of a reward. The next thing that I want to say is that there's an atonement. There's like a second atonement in this road back. Let's call this the road back. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to combine these steps here with this nice little graphic here. So the road back, see this, about 3/4 of the way through the story, the hero is driven to complete the adventure, leaving the special world to be sure the treasure is brought home. But a chase scene signals the urgency, danger of the mission, and the hero needs to get back after having seized the reward, and oftentimes has to come up with one last moment, a final acceptance of self. Can you write that down? Final acceptance of self. All right, 11 is the resurrection, often called right here. The resurrection is the hero is severely tested once more on the threshold of home. He or she is purified by a last sacrifice, another moment of death and rebirth. but on a higher and more complete level. By the hero's action, the polarities that were in conflict at the beginning are finally resolved. Can you guys just circle that? Okay, and that's what we have here in this atonement, road back, final acceptance of self, and a resurrection before going back. And then there's finally the return. The hero returns home or continues the journey bearing some element of the treasure that has the power to transform the world as the hero has been transformed. So there's the return there. Now, I would say that it's very possible that atonement and resurrection could be seen as a similar thing. So the heroes, there's one more test here. And so a final acceptance of self is then seen, is then having to be realized in this moment where there's one last threshold, one last, I guess, challenge before the complete return. All right, hopefully that makes sense. So I just want this filled out with the numbers 1 through 12. And then I would like you to make sure that your name is on this. And your name is on this. I'll actually put Schuler here, period 6. And I'll write Schuler here. And we'll talk a little bit more about these. So here's the goal. Mrs. Barton is going to show you The Lion King. Now, I want you to watch The Lion King. That's what you're going to fill out here. With your eyes focused on these steps. And if you need help with what each of these mean, here are your definitions. So, I want you to make sure that you've got this all filled out in each one of these steps. Now, step number 6, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is kind of 6A, 6B, 6C. Then 7 is the approach, 8 is the ordeal, 9 is the reward. The transformation is also a part of that. So I guess we could use that. 10, let's see, what do I have back over here? Let's do 9 as the reward. I'm going to keep the transformation as this is 9A, 9B. The transformation and the reward. And then the atonement is going to be 10, which I'm also going to call the road back. Then the resurrection on the other side is 11 and 12. Now these might change. The order might change a little bit, so I'll be interested to hear what you have to say. So your goal is to analyze The Lion King through this lens. So Mrs. Barton is going to start the movie. Hopefully you've got all of these papers in front of you. And on Friday, when she sees you again, I'm going to ask you to review. I'm going to ask Mrs. Barton to have you review with your neighbor what each of these are, the name of the guy, Joseph Campbell, the monomyth, what that is. Take a look at this, share what you've written so far, and then she'll start the movie again. And then hopefully by the end of class on Friday, you're going to have all of this filled out to here. And then we'll talk about more here at the end. Okay, so there you go. And I hope you have a lot of fun. Enjoy, stay off your phones, and make sure that if you're whispering to your neighbor that you actually have a really quiet whisper and that you don't distract others, because I really want you to focus on this. Okie doke. Bye.